Back in 2021, I, like many, played the original Shin Megami Tensei 5. It was a good game, very good in fact, but not one of my favourites for that year. The two biggest issues I had with it were the performance of the game on the Switch and the story, especially in the later stages. So when I started to see the early signs of a complete version of the game in June 2023, I started to follow that with anticipation. It didn't take long after for my wish to be granted, as SMT5 Vengeance was made known to the world, a version of the game that was described by producer Shinjiro Takata as the quote, best version of Shin Megami Tensei 5. The version that would add all the features they couldn't realise in the original, the intended vision of the game made fully manifest. For all intents then, my two issues with the original could be addressed here. I want to thank Sega for sponsoring this video and allowing me the chance to play the game early on my platform of choice, that being the PC. It is also coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series S and X, and Nintendo Switch. All commentary I will be giving though will be on the PC version, so some aspects may differ. This video is going to be intended as an overview, a way to give you guys an idea about the new features and what I think about them, and as such the footage I will show here, with the exception of some specific features, will be from my first 5 hours of the game to avoid heavy spoilers. I've already given my opinion on the game as a whole when I played the original, and despite its title, Vengeance is still the same game at its core. Same combat, same exploration, and same characters for the most part with a few additions. If you want my short opinion though, it's taken a very good game in the original and improved on it in a multitude of ways. While playing through Vengeance, there was nothing that I looked at and thought to myself, that was better in the original. Pretty much everything from the original was kept, they simply added features both minor and major to enrich the experience further. And of course the first thing I wanted to do before I even started a new game was to check out the settings for the PC version, and my biggest disappointment with the game was right here, funnily enough. I was already bracing myself when I saw the admittedly low-end recommended specs for the PC port, which is fine, it makes it more accessible and that's never a bad thing, plus Atlus games aren't known for their graphical intensity. But when I saw articles from people who got to play the game on PS5 for instance at events, some made the point that they were able to play in 4K. Well, the PC port, as far as I could see, did not have this. The max I could get to was 1080p. I wanted more, but it's still better than the 720p that the original was locked to. The rest of the settings though are what you would expect. Anti-aliasing, VSync, the option to turn off motion blur, thank god, and frame caps, something that the original needed badly. In the PC version you can cap the FPS at 30, 60, 120, 144 and unlimited. I went with 120 and it was buttery smooth, nary a drop during the entire playthrough. And it's a stable port too. During the course of my 59-hour playthrough there was not one crash, so very little to get up in arms about in regards to the port itself. Now next part, story. This is the only time I will bring up the Vengeance specific narrative because I don't want to spoil it for you at all, but I will answer this, especially if you haven't seen the showcases in the lead up to release. That question being, is the new content easy to miss? Is it similar to games like Persona 5 Royal for instance, where you have to get confidants to a certain rank before a particular part of the story in order to get the new stuff? Very easily overlooked, especially if you're not aware. Well, put it this way, you'd have to actively try and miss the Vengeance route. As soon as you start a new game, you're presented with a choice. Go down the canon of creation, which will have the game play out like the original, or go down the canon of Vengeance, which will open up the new story. The game even gives you a tooltip beforehand to tell you which path does what, so like I say, you cannot miss it. All I'll say about the content of the story is that it is very much different from the original game, but I'll be leaving it there. Right, the game itself. We'll start with exploration, where there are some notable additions right off the bat. The first one that I want to highlight is actually quite unassuming, but it became one of my go-to tools when exploring the world, an unsung hero for my playthrough. Press up on the D-pad and you go into a bird's eye view, and you can pan the camera around your immediate vicinity. This was massively useful to me, especially in the later darts that have more complex map structures. SMT5 as a game is characterised by a lot of verticality in its maps. You get to higher ground and then drop down to lower areas to find Memons, essences and the like. The sky view allowed me to see where an item was, but more importantly, how I could potentially get to it. I could pan around, see where the map elevated, and that would eventually lead me to the route I needed. It's a very small change, but I depended on this like a duckling following the mama duck. It won't take you too long to find the next addition too. As you go around, you'll find these pronounced nodes around the map. These are the Magatsuhi rails, which allow you to traverse at high speed between a pair of nodes, and they do two things. Initially, they allow you to get to previously inaccessible areas from the first game. These often have essences, items, and sometimes new quests, of which there's plenty in this game. I found 7 unique quests in the first dart alone. The second purpose is to act as a shortcut. It alleviates backtracking if you need to go back to a leyline fount and heal up. So no longer do you need to run back to where you were to continue progress, you can just zip back over via these rails instead. Also, if you press the right trigger on an Xbox One controller, you can see on the map where the rails connect to, so you can plan out your routes more efficiently. The final part in regards to exploration will be, I wouldn't say a controversial addition, but I think for people who have played the earlier SMT games especially, they may look at this feature and think it takes away from the tension of an SMT game. But they can stick to the original format if they want to. I see this feature as nothing but a net positive, and that is the ability to save wherever you want. No longer do you need to go back to a leyline fount. You get 20 save slots, and I was abusing the hell out of this feature, saving every 10 minutes if that. And it just makes sense to me, because even in the original SMT5 it gave you warnings when a difficult fight was about to begin, so having the ability to just save at that spot is hugely appreciated and convenient. So that rounds out the notable features specific to exploration, but there's far more to cover. The next port of call will be, well, us, the Nahobino. A couple of changes were made here too. Initially, the level cap has been raised. You can now push on beyond level 99 to level 150, which is very useful for those super bosses, especially the DLC content. It is worth mentioning that the base version of SMT5 Vengeance does have certain DLC from the original added here. Not all of it, but a lot of the stuff players would want to partake in. So stuff like Rage of a Queen, Goddess in Training, the Doctor's Last Wish, and the Return of the True Demon are all included in Vengeance, so you'll definitely need those extra levels for some of those. There are a couple of new miracles too, in particular ones that you can toggle on or off. They default to on, but if you would rather have more control over the Nahobino and what happens in battle, you simply go to the character menu, scroll down, and you can turn off the features of your choosing that have the option to do so. For me though, the biggest change in regards to the Nahobino is in the ability to reset your build. In the original you could not do this as far as I could see, at least without the intervention of DLC. If you went down a strength based route for example and then found an Algami essence with a cool magic based ability, too bad, you're stuck with that strength build to the end of the game. Vengeance gives that option. You can find items called New Testament tablets in your journey, and they will function as a way to reset your stats. They are quite rare. I only found 4 during my entire playthrough, but having the option at all is only a plus. It is worth mentioning as well that glory crystals, incenses, grimoires and gospels can all be stacked together and used in bulk now too. And the last thing I want to mention in regards to the Nahobino are indeed those Algami essences. These weren't necessarily the best essences, but they were certainly the coolest as they gave you Nahobino specific skills. Despite how special they were though, and how out of the way they could be, they were just like any other essence in the original, an unassuming glitter on the ground. Vengeance made a small change here for the better. The Algami essences now use the Algami character model on the map so they're easily spotted, and there's also a marker placed on them as well for good measure. This is even better when you consider you have much deeper draw distance on the PC version, so you can scout these out more effectively. The last port of call for this video will be the demons, and by extension the battles. I'm certain a lot of players will revisit Vengeance purely for the additions here. Initially, and I'd say one of the biggest draws of the game, is that Vengeance sports 40 new demons, bringing the entire compendium up to 270. You'll see these new demons very early on, and they'll often take up the positions of old demons from the original, though you could still find those old ones elsewhere too. But Atlus also wanted to give a bit more individuality to each of the demons, a bit more utility to their makeup. So what they've done is they've given each of them a new passive skill unique to that demon, which gives you even more options in battle itself. And some of these passive skills, for lack of a better word, are straight up busted, especially the later demons. And that's all good with me. A big draw of Shin Megami Tensei is fusing demons to make ever stronger ones, so it makes sense that the endgame ones are just insanely strong. Does it take away from the difficulty? Potentially, but it's still fun nonetheless. Battles will also be a window into the new songs added to the OST. Atlus added 20 new battle themes alone in this release, and they reworked around 80% of the original's offering too. It's a mixed bag for me, not all of it is to my personal tastes, but it all fits the theme and atmosphere of an SMT game. There's nothing that stands out to me as out of place. Now, battle itself, the makeup is very similar to the original, that being the utilisation of the press turn system. Focus on enemy weaknesses and get more turns before they annihilate you. Despite the intricacy of the system though, Atlus added something which I dared not touch through my entire playthrough, so I can't give any sort of window into how well it works. Vengeance has an auto-battle feature, which to me, auto-battle and Shin Megami Tensei doesn't really mix together. Like I say, I stuck purely to the traditional method of maintaining complete control, but it was added to make battles go faster, I imagine to aid in grinding if you ever needed to do it. In terms of grinding, you can now stack fights together for greater rewards. A new item was added to Vengeance called an Attract Pipe. These have been in other games like Nocturne, and when you use them you become a lightning rod for surrounding demons. This method makes grinding far easier, and if you're gunning for that level 150 cap, this will make that journey far easier. It's not just demons too. You do get certain guest characters joining your team during the course of the game depending on where you are in the story, and they do stick around for a while in some cases, so don't worry about them taking up a spot. And then there's negotiation. This got a few changes too. Some new negotiation methods have been added here, like quizzes, which add a little more variety, and also, this is something I consistently made a pig's ear of when I played the original. If you cannot add a demon into your stock because, for instance, you have no space or you're too low level at the time, if you come back to that demon within a certain time frame, they will join you as soon as you start talking to them. You no longer need to go through the entire process again and waste your resources. If you leave it too long, you will need to repeat the process, but the fact that the feature has been added is once again a net positive for me. But demons are not just limited to negotiation. Atlus also added a sort of social link light feature to Vengeance. Persona, and it looks like Metaphor ReFantasio, place heavy importance on social links, and while Vengeance is certainly not at that level, it's definitely in that same bracket of inspiration. When you go to a leyline fount, you can go to a separated space of the dart called the Demon Haunt, and you can talk to your demons here for items, they can learn new skills, or their stats will slowly increase the longer they stay in your team. It's pretty obvious what this was done for. It's to not only give you a bit more support in your journey through the items you get, but also to keep your demons up to par. Too often can you have a demon that you can't find a suitable fusion for and they sort of just rot away until you finally get around to doing so, or you abandon them, your choice. At least with this, that demon can still maintain a degree of usefulness until you fuse them into something better. It's certainly nothing special, but it's a good addition, and also gives you more time to chill out with your bro Aogami. And that is it guys, those are the new features of Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance that made a meaningful impact on my own playthrough. There are others, but in some cases I've purposely omitted them for spoiler purposes, or I didn't think they were impactful enough to mention here. Of course, that will come down to subjectivity though. My main goal and hope though is that it's given you an idea of the improvements specific to Vengeance. Like I said at the start of the video, they have taken a very good game and improved on it. Whether you feel those changes are worth your money will be up to you, but if you do find yourself jumping in for a second time or even a first playthrough for those who waited for a definitive version, I hope you have as good a time as I did. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, despite all the amazing games coming out this year, is still a must-play JRPG of 2024. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.